Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Let's dive into today's story where a painter faced an uphill battle against poor decision-making. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. Painting disaster. How rust taught my boss a hard lesson. This happened about a month ago, and it's one of those moments where I felt like I was watching a disaster unfold in slow motion. I work as an industrial painter, mainly painting machinery. Usually when I get a job, they tell me what kind of paint to use and the color, and it's pretty straightforward. But on this particular day, I was given an unusual and frankly questionable assignment. They told me to use water-based paint, latex, on a carbon steel job. Now, if you know anything about painting, you'd understand why this wasn't a great idea. I immediately went to my boss and told her that water-based paint on carbon steel was a terrible choice. I explained that it would rust the metal, ruining the paint job and possibly weakening the metal itself. But she was adamant. She said, "I don't care, just use the paint. They're going to be here next week." At that point, I had no choice but to proceed. I asked her to write down the specific paint I was supposed to use and signed off on it, just to cover myself in case anything went wrong. It wasn't ideal, but I figured I'd do my job as instructed. For anyone who doesn't understand the issue, putting water-based paint on rustable metal is a recipe for disaster. The water can seep into the pores of the steel, accelerating the rusting process. It not only ruins the paint job, but it could also cause structural damage to the metal over time. But I went ahead with it because that was the directive I was given. I did my prep work, which took a whole day. Then I painted the machinery and let it sit for a couple of days to dry and cure properly. A week later, my boss came up to me, visibly upset. She said the job looked horrible because rust was showing through the paint. I calmly reminded her that I had followed her instructions exactly, and I reiterated that water and air cause metal to rust, and the water-based paint was never going to work in this situation. We went back and forth for a bit, with her finally conceding that she'd been wrong, but then she asked how we could fix it. I told her that the best option was to sandblast the whole thing to remove the paint and start fresh with oil-based enamel paint. That would give the job the durability it needed and avoid any further rusting issues. She agreed to the plan and got me the sand I needed to strip the paint off the machinery. After all that, she finally seemed to trust me when I said some things just won't work. It took a bit of frustration, but in the end, we got the job done properly, and I was able to prove my point. Now, whenever I bring up a potential issue, she listens a bit more closely before dismissing it. It was one of those situations where I knew better, but I had to let the process unfold to make my point. At least now, I'm confident that my boss will think twice before making decisions without understanding the consequences. She's your boss and doesn't understand the process of prepping and using the right formula of paint to prevent rust? I don't think she needs to be the boss. Anyway, great malicious compliance here. You followed the instructions to the letter, even getting written confirmation to cover yourself. When everything predictably went sideways, the responsibility fell squarely on the boss's shoulders. And the best part? The experience actually taught her to listen. Eventually. And our second story. Smug cryptocurrency billionaire got exactly what he deserved. Once upon a time, I had this hotshot Zoomer living next door. His name was Anton. The guy was absolutely convinced that one lucky Bitcoin deal had turned him into a super mega investor. You know, that mindset of, I struck it big once, so now I deserve all the crypto guru laurels. Naturally, he didn't put any real effort. He'd just lounge on the couch all day, occasionally growling at the cat, as if the cat were to blame for his lazy lifestyle. But to give him credit, he did manage to put down a decent payment on his house thanks to that crypto windfall. At first, living next door to Anton seemed like a breeze. He had a beautiful house, and he always wanted a flashy car. Then one day, after emerging from some mysterious corner of the internet, Anton boasted, Anton, sprawling importantly in an armchair, "Guess what, bro? I bought myself a Lambo. On credit, of course, but now all the girls are gonna go wild." Me, looking at his eager eyes, "Congrats. Just don't forget to buy polish and a couple of products to care for the bodywork. Lamborghinis can be pretty fussy." Anton, with forced condescension, Oh, come on. Don't teach an investor. I got everything under control. I'm a car enthusiast. I have a whole collection of auto care products in my garage. On the shelves, there are cleaners, waxes, polishes, all sorts of stuff, because I like washing and polishing my baby by myself. I'm used to keeping the garage doors open during the day. No point closing them if I'm always out in the yard. Then I started noticing some of my cans and bottles would disappear, only to return half empty in some miraculous way. At first, I thought I was just forgetting where I'd put them, but then I realized not only were some bottles tampered with, they were also being topped off with something else so I wouldn't notice. Right away, I suspected Anton. He'd just gotten his new car, and I was sure didn't want to spend money on unnecessary things like a decent wash and proper car care products. Meanwhile, my garage was stocked. Go ahead, take what you want. Or rather, take what you want without asking. So I decided to teach him a lesson. I hid all the good car care stuff in the storage closet and left a few harsher substances out on the shelf. A bottle of rust remover based on hydrochloric acid and another bottle of phosphoric acid solution meant for descaling. For disguise, I stuck correct labels on them just in case Anton's eyesight was as bad as his common sense. Time passed, and as expected, one of the bottles soon disappeared. The next morning, I heard Anton grunting and muttering in his yard. Anton, voice from beyond the fence, "This stuff stinks of something sour, gross." Well, anyway, all those chemical things smell nasty. I'll just pour all of this on my Lambo now so it'll shine. I just snorted. Clearly, he sprayed the rust remover on the paint job and decided to let it soak in. I can imagine he probably got lost in his phone after that because, time's money and I'm an investor, and forgot about the car. About 20 minutes later, he went back outside, and judging by the sounds, that's when it hit him. Anton, in utter horror, What? What the hell? Oh, why are there acid rivers running down my car?" I have to admit, I never heard anyone swear louder or more colorfully than Anton did in that moment. And you know what's funniest? I didn't even peek over the fence. I just paused in my head and thought, should I indulge in some schadenfreude now, or wait a bit? Seems it kicked in all by itself. After the incident, nothing ever went missing from my garage again. Anton sulked around for a couple of days trying to scrub the car, repaint it again. Then his crypto started tanking hard, and by mid-2022, it was obvious things were going downhill for him. He sold his house, took off in some unknown direction, and I haven't heard from him or seen him since. I hope I never again cross paths with investment geniuses like that. And he probably gave up his Lambo along with the loan. Old man neighborhood from the far end of the street, smiling, serves him right. Young people these days just download everything. Money out of thin air. Chemicals from someone else's garage. Me, laughing. You're not wrong, Grandpa. The only thing I feel bad for is the Lamborghini. It wasn't the car's fault its owner had his hand screwed on backwards. That's the story, and it reminded me once again, it's better to keep an eye on your garage and keep your ear to the ground when it comes to neighbors, especially if your neighbor thinks one lucky crypto break means he always knows what he's doing. And our last story, how I took out the trash and the neighbor. I live in England in a council flat managed by a housing trust. The house is divided into two flats. I have the upstairs flat with a small storage space downstairs and a front and back garden. My downstairs neighbor, Karen, has her own front door, two sheds in the back garden, and a back door leading to her yard. When I moved in last November, I thought it would be neighborly to introduce myself. Karen seemed nice enough at first. I explained my habits, like keeping the TV or music on all the time for mental health reasons, and asked her to let me know if it ever became an issue. She assured me everything was fine, and I felt hopeful about living next door to her. Oh, how wrong I was. At first, it was the bins. Karen's wheelie bin was overflowing with neon yellow bin bags, a strange choice that set her apart from everyone else using standard black bags. I didn't think much of it until I went to use my own bin and found it stuffed to the brim with her distinctive yellow bags. Annoying, but I let it slide. I moved my bin to the bottom of my garden near the gate to make it easier for me to manage and figured the problem was solved. That was until I got sick with the flu one week and couldn't retrieve my bin after trash collection. When I finally went to fetch it, I found it in Karen's garden full of her rubbish. My bin is unmistakably mine, covered in bright stickers. There's no way she could have accidentally thought it was hers. This was deliberate. I retrieved it, feeling both irritated and determined to put an end to this nonsense. Things escalated when I noticed her back garden. Karen's sheds were overflowing with bin bags, and the rubbish had spilled into the garden itself. She rarely put her bins out, and when she did, they were bursting at the seams. Recycling boxes overflowed with strange items, including dirty dishes. The growing trash pile was an eyesore, not to mention a potential health hazard. When Karen started throwing trash directly into the back garden instead of bagging it properly, I decided it was time to act. Being on the Housing Trust resident panel gave me a unique advantage. At a meeting, I casually brought up the issue, saying, "Will the trash pile affect the garden maintenance you promised?" Without directly naming Karen, I planted the seed. Then I started gathering evidence, photos of the growing rubbish heap, her overflowing bins, and even her shed doors left open with trash spilling out. I shared everything with my housing officer, who visited my property under the pretense of assessing the garden for maintenance. He spotted the trash pile and issued Karen a warning letter. Her response? "The rubbish was here when I moved in." Without proof otherwise, the Housing Trust planned to clear the trash themselves. But I wasn't about to let Karen off that easily. Determined to catch her in the act, I befriended the family next door whose garden bordered ours. They allowed me to camp out near their broken fence panel, giving me a clear view of Karen's back door. Over 3 days, I sat there, phone in hand, waiting for my moment. Finally, I hit the jackpot. Karen opened her back door and tossed out black bin bags onto the already towering trash pile. I filmed the whole thing, thanked my amused neighbors for their patience, and sent the video to my housing officer. Weeks passed with no updates, and I started to lose hope. Then one February morning, I was jolted awake by loud banging and clattering. Peeking out my window, I saw a white van parked outside, movers carrying furniture out of Karen's flat. I checked my email to find a message from the housing officer. "Thank you for your help. Final action is being taken." I made myself a cup of tea, planted myself by the window, and watched with a smug grin as Karen's belongings were loaded into the van. When the movers noticed me watching, I gave them a cheeky wave, my face full of satisfaction. Karen was finally gone. The Housing Trust cleared the trash pile, and a new tenant, a lovely young woman, moved in shortly after. She's polite and keeps to herself, and we chat occasionally when hanging out washing. Most importantly, she respects the shared spaces. As for Karen, I don't know where she ended up, but I do know this: if you're evicted from a housing association property, good luck finding another one. The lesson here? Don't mess with my bins. Or me. I can't even imagine how someone could produce that much garbage. What the hell was she throwing out? I'm happy OP now has a respectful neighbor, but it's baffling to think about how much effort Karen put into creating problems instead of solving them. What do you all think? Could you deal with a neighbor like that? Or would you have gone nuclear sooner? Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.